By the end of that summer, my family's name was everywhere, but not for the reasons they'd planned. I was 29, vice president of marketing at a top Boston tech firm, and I thought I understood the limits of betrayal. Turns out, I didn't even know where the bottom was. I had spent years believing that if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, and played by the rules, I would finally belong. That family loyalty would mean something. Eventually, but what they didn't know was that I had learned how to fight back. Calmly, quietly, and in ways they could never see coming until it was too late. If you've ever watched the people closest to you choose someone else over you at the very moment you needed them most, let me know where you're watching from. I want to hear your story. 2. Let me set the scene. My name is Avery. I grew up in the leafy, old money suburbs just west of Boston. My job, vice president of marketing, pulling in just under $400,000 a year. I put myself through school at Northeastern while my parents paid for my younger sister's tuition, her car, even her rent in Manhattan. It's just what family does. My mom would say, I thought it was normal. At least for us. For as long as I can remember, every milestone in my life came second to my sister's needs. Her name is Betrayal. She's 25. An influencer with an uncanny ability to be at the center of every family event. Birthdays. Graduations. Even the night I got promoted, my parents would say, let's not make a big deal. Brielle's just had a rough week. They always said it was because she was more sensitive, more vulnerable. The truth, she was the golden child, and I was the fallback. Still, I did what was expected. I paid for my own degree, took out loans, and watched as my parents quietly covered Brielle's credit card debt more than $60,000 in a single year. At one point, it wasn't just money. Either, it was time. I handled every family holiday when my mom couldn't handle the stress. Made airport runs. Picked up dry cleaning. Helped my dad organize his real estate files. All while juggling a full-time job and a master's degree. You might be wondering why I kept going. Honestly, because I thought one day, it would be my turn. That's what families do. Right. You put in the effort, and eventually you get seen. But looking back, I see all the little ways I was being set up, like the time my mom lost my grandmother's Cartier necklace. The one meant for me in her will. Or when my dad added Brielle to the deed of their house for tax reasons and told me not to worry. It's funny how small details can loom so large in hindsight. Like the wedding planning session where my mom insisted on a second cake just in case Brielle wants something different. Or the moment I noticed my best friend Elena looking at me, her face pale, as if she wanted to warn me but couldn't. If you're thinking all this sounds a little too familiar, you're not alone. I spent years believing I was the problem, that if I could just be a little less demanding, a little more forgiving, things would change. But I was about to learn the hard way. Sometimes, the only way out is through, and the only way to survive is to stop playing the game by their rules. Let's go back. Just a few months before the day everything fell apart. Looking back now, it's almost surreal how invisible the sacrifice can become when it's expected of you. For as long as I can remember, I was the one who held things together. Every family holiday. Every last-minute emergency. Every time someone needed a bailout, I was the one they called. Growing up, it wasn't always obvious. When I was a kid, I thought I was lucky. My parents liked to remind me how responsible I was, how I could be trusted with anything. By middle school, I was organizing my own birthday parties, making sure Brielle had her favorite cake, and cleaning up after everyone else. My parents would smile and say, "You're so mature for your age. Not like your sister. She just needs a little extra help." I started my first job at 16, stocking shelves at a local bookstore, I saved up for a used Honda, paid my own insurance, and never once expected anyone to chip in. Brielle, meanwhile, got a new BMW for her 18th birthday. I remember the party my parents threw her, a huge celebration at a country club in Weston, the same place my graduation dinner had been too expensive to hold. She crashed that car within a year. The insurance bill alone was over $11,000. But no one ever mentioned it again. They just replaced the car, quietly, before she left for college. As we got older, the gap only widened. I took out student loans and worked 2 jobs to cover my tuition at Northeastern. Brielle went to NYU. And my parents covered everything: her rent, her tuition, even her spending money. When I needed to move out after college, my dad suggested I find roommates in Allston to save money. For Brielle, they leased a luxury studio in Manhattan. More than $4,000 a month. For 3 straight years. Of course, my parents always had a way of justifying it. She's struggling. She's not as strong as you are. She just needs a little boost. I heard those words so many times they lost all meaning. There were emotional debts, too. When my mom broke her wrist, it was me who took 3 weeks off work to help her recover. Cooking and cleaning while still juggling conference calls from the kitchen. Every Christmas, I handled the logistics, grocery lists, decorations, gift wrapping so my mom wouldn't get overwhelmed. When my dad had a health scare, it was me who drove him to appointments, argued with insurance, read the fine print, filled out paperwork. No one ever asked Brielle to take on any of this. The expectation was clear: Avery handles it. Brielle needs her rest. Even when Brielle made mistakes, failing 2 semesters at NYU, running up $20,000 in credit card bills, forgetting to pay her utilities, it was always Avery to the rescue. My parents would sigh. She's just not built for stress. You always know what to do. By the time I hit my late 20s, I'd stopped arguing. I told myself that it was just family, that everyone had their roles, and if my role was to keep the peace and make things work, so be it. But every sacrifice started to add up. I calculated it once over 10 years. I'd paid more than $65,000 for emergencies that weren't mine. Late rent, medical co-pays, even a designer purse Brielle needed for an event. Because we can't let her look less than her friends. Maybe you've been there, too. Maybe you've watched the people you love walk all over your boundaries, just because you made it look easy. It's a strange kind of loneliness. The kind that makes you question your own judgment. Was I really the responsible one? Or just the most convenient? The turning point, though, was quieter than you'd expect. It was just another Sunday. My parents texting about dinner plans, Brielle calling because her phone bill was overdue again. I remember sitting on my apartment floor, sorting through a pile of unpaid family invoices, and realizing I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked how I was doing. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself I'd push through. Just a little longer. The wedding was coming up. Maybe. Finally. It would be my moment. Maybe this time, the family would show up for me the way I'd shown up for them. I had no idea how wrong I was. I wish I could say I saw it coming. But the truth is, betrayal never announces itself all at once. It starts as a whisper, small, uneasy details you ignore because you desperately want to believe the best of your family. Looking back now, every sign was there. But at the time, I just kept giving them the benefit of the doubt. It began with the necklace. The Cartier piece my grandmother left me. The only thing of real value I'd ever been promised. I was supposed to wear it on my wedding day. My mother had kept it in her safe for safekeeping. Or so she claimed. When I asked about it, She brushed me off. It's being cleaned. Avery, don't stress. At first, I believed her. After all, I was busy juggling last-minute wedding details, vendor calls, guest lists, final fittings. My fiancé, Daniel, kept telling me to let others help. But that's never been my strong suit. A week before the wedding, a strange charge showed up in my email, a transfer for $25,000 from one of my accounts to a Betrayal Creative LLC. I stared at the notification for a long time. I'd never authorized that payment. But when I called the bank, they said my mother was listed as a co-signer. She had handled my accounts for years. Mostly out of convenience. Just in case there's an emergency. She always said. I confronted her about the charge. She insisted it was a clerical error. You know how these systems mess things up? She said. Her voice all fake sweetness. Don't worry. I'll fix it. The money never came back. Little details started piling up. My florist called to confirm the delivery address for the bridal bouquet but gave me Brielle's apartment instead of the venue. When I questioned it, the florist was apologetic. But I could hear someone else in the background. A woman laughing. Later that night, Brielle posted a photo to Instagram, a huge bouquet. The exact arrangement I'd ordered. The caption, "Can't wait for my big day," at the time. I brushed it off. She was always dramatic. Always making every moment about herself. But the sense of unease only grew. My best friend, Elena, who had been acting strangely for weeks, finally broke down the night before my rehearsal dinner. She showed up at my door, pale, shaky, holding her phone out to me. I can't keep this from you anymore, she whispered. You need to see what they've been saying. She handed me her phone. A group chat, my mom, Brielle, my dad, and half the extended family buzzing with messages about damage control. They were worried about appearances, about managing Avery's expectations, about making sure Brielle's engagement gets the attention it deserves. The date, the very same day as my wedding. The more I scrolled, the worse it got. My mom complaining about how Avery will just have to understand. My dad suggesting they double book the family travel. Most people would rather see Brielle anyway. Photos from Brielle's engagement party popped up. A party I hadn't even known was happening. And there, front and center, was my grandmother's Cartier necklace around Brielle's neck. I felt like I'd been punched. I tried to breathe. But my world spun. Every suspicion, every little odd moment suddenly made sense. The missing RSVPs from relatives, the way vendors kept changing plans at the last minute, the coldness in my parents' voices when I asked if they were excited. They were all in on it. My wedding was nothing but collateral damage. Elena squeezed my hand. There's more, she said quietly. She forwarded me screenshots of emails between my mother and several vendors. Explicit instructions to reroute gifts, transfer deposits, even switch catering orders to Brielle's event. That's when I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coordinated campaign. My family hadn't just forgotten me. They had chosen, step by step, to betray me for Brielle's sake. And now they were using my own money, my own inheritance, to do it. All those years, I thought if I just kept giving, one day I would matter. In that moment, I realized no amount of sacrifice would ever be enough. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, something colder settled inside me. If this was how they wanted to play it, I could play, too. But I would play by different rules. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out at the city lights, replaying every word from that group chat in my mind. It was as if every little suspicion, every odd moment, had suddenly snapped into focus. For the first time, I truly saw my family for who they were, not just people who overlooked me, but people who had planned, step by step, to erase me from my own life's most important day. The first layer of betrayal was obvious: the necklace, the money, the wedding sabotage. Brielle was wearing my grandmother's Cartier piece in photos that had already started spreading across social media. My own family had redirected gifts, hijacked vendors, and sent out emails to make sure the spotlight landed squarely on my sister. But as I kept reading, it got worse. Beneath the surface, the deeper conspiracy came into view. This wasn't just about one event. I found email threads going back months, my mother and Brielle strategizing about how to keep Avery from making it all about herself, planning to reroute family attention, and even coaching relatives on what to say if I asked too many questions. There were lists, actual spreadsheets, with gift allocations, payment instructions, and talking points for extended family. My stomach twisted as I realized how many people had been in on it, how carefully they'd managed my exclusion. The third layer was the most devastating of all. It was the realization that this pattern, this machinery of betrayal, had been in motion for years. The birthdays where my cake was lost in the shuffle, the college graduation where my parents left early for Brielle's dance recital, the job promotion dinner that never happened because Brielle was feeling down. It wasn't a series of accidents. It was a script. I had been cast in the role of the responsible one, the fallback. While my sister was the headliner, always, my sacrifices were expected. My successes were inconvenient. Sitting there in the dark, I remember how the world outside kept moving. Cars still passed by. The city lights blinked on and off. Somewhere, someone was probably laughing. Clinking glasses. Not even knowing my world had cracked open. That's the thing about betrayal. It feels like drowning in slow motion. But the sky above is still blue. I thought about the necklace. About my grandmother's quiet strength. She had built her life from nothing, surviving loss after loss, and still managed to leave a legacy. I wondered what she would think if she saw us, now her name twisted into a power game, her gift used as a weapon. All those breadcrumbs, all those strange details, finally fit together. The payments, the missing invitations, the clerical errors, the sudden changes in vendor plans, every piece had been a warning. And I'd ignored them because I wanted so badly to believe I belonged. But there was a strange clarity in the pain. I was done making excuses. I was finished being grateful for scraps. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth without flinching. If my family wanted to play games, I could play, too. But I wouldn't fight for their love anymore. I'd fight for myself. Calmly. Systematically. I would make sure the truth came out. No matter how long it took, or how many people tried to spin the story. That night, as the city finally went quiet, I opened my laptop. I started organizing every document, every screenshot, every bank record I could find. The evidence was there, spread out in plain sight. All I had to do was connect the dots. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about every year, every holiday, every moment I'd been asked to step aside. I could finally see the pattern, and I was ready to break it. From that moment, everything changed. It was almost like flipping a switch inside me. I went from hurt to focused in a matter of hours. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want a screaming match or some dramatic blow-up. I wanted truth. I wanted justice. And for once, I was going to be strategic. The next morning, I started small, quiet. I spent hours combing through my email, bank statements, and cloud storage, documenting every transfer, every suspicious charge. every piece of evidence that pointed to my mother and Brielle's scheme. There was no shortage of receipts, more than 100 pages worth by the time I finished. Payments rerouted to Brielle's business. Wedding deposits redirected. Group chat screenshots where my mother literally coached relatives on what to say to me. It was all there. Hiding in plain sight. I reached out to Elena first. My best friend had already risked everything to show me those group chats. And now she sat with me for hours, helping me organize the digital trail. "We need a paper trail for everything," she said. She was right. Every detail mattered. I booked a meeting with an attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Julia, famous in Boston circles for handling high-stakes inheritance and fraud cases. I walked her through the entire story, laying out timelines, numbers, names. Julia took one look at the evidence and nodded. "You have enough for a civil suit, possibly even a criminal complaint," she told me. "We'll start with an asset freeze and notification to the IRS about possible fraud. Then we go public. But only when you're protected legally." Those words settled me. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I had an ally, a professional who knew exactly how to play this game. With Julia's help, we drafted demand letters and served notice to the wedding vendors and the bank, flagging the unauthorized transactions. At the same time, I quietly reached out to my extended family. Not everyone had known the full story. I sent a calm, fact-based email, laying out the facts and attaching copies of the evidence, no commentary. No emotion. Just the truth. "This is what's been happening. I am no longer willing to cover for anyone. Here is what I am doing to protect myself." The ripple effect was immediate. Brielle called. Frantic. Trying to blame accounting mistakes and bad advice from mom. My mother tried to guilt me, Avery. "You can't ruin the family's reputation. Think of how this will look." My father left a voicemail late one night, saying, "This has gone too far. You're tearing the family apart." I didn't respond. Not yet. Meanwhile, my attorney worked behind the scenes. The asset freeze stopped Brielle from accessing the funds she had siphoned. The bank began investigating the forgeries. Wedding vendors reversed the fraudulent changes, one even called to apologize, admitting my mother had threatened to sue them if they didn't cooperate. For the first time in my life, the power dynamic was shifting. I wasn't pleading or apologizing anymore. I was calm, professional. Everything was on the record. The day before Brielle's engagement party, the same day as my own wedding was supposed to be, I made one last call. I spoke with the venue manager, who confirmed that my family had transferred my deposit to Brielle's account using a forged signature. With legal documents in hand, Julia filed an injunction to halt the event and freeze all assets associated with the account. I'll never forget the look on their faces when the news broke. Guests started getting emails and calls from the venue and the bank. Vendors sent group messages, some even posting publicly about the unprecedented fraud that had disrupted their events. I stayed silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. As the fallout spread, I realized something profound. I wasn't just defending myself. I was exposing a pattern, one that had gone unchallenged for years. I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it to finally draw a line and protect the life I had built. For the first time, I saw the possibility of peace. Not because they'd changed, but because I had. Once the legal gears began to turn, everything unfolded faster than I'd imagined. The day the injunction landed, Brielle's party collapsed in real time. Guests were turned away at the door. Caterers and florists refused delivery. And word spread like wildfire. People who'd spent years pretending not to notice the favoritism were suddenly confronted with evidence too public, too well documented, to ignore. Extended relatives, colleagues, even my parents' oldest friends reached out. Some with shocked apologies, some with nothing but stunned silence. The story didn't stay private. That same week, a vendor who'd lost money in the scheme posted a detailed account on social media. Hundreds of comments followed, many from people in my parents' professional circle. The whispers turned to open conversations. Rumors about fraud, forged signatures, and financial exploitation started spreading through our suburb, reaching as far as my office downtown. For years, my parents had protected their reputation above everything. Now, it was slipping through their fingers, and there was nothing they could do to control the narrative. Brielle's influencer contracts dried up almost overnight. Brands started pulling deals, and her manager cut ties the moment the story gained traction online. Suddenly, the invitations to glamorous events stopped coming. Her social media following plummeted as people learned the truth: how she'd used not just family money, but money stolen from her own sister to fund her perfect life. Her credit was frozen, her accounts under investigation, and the luxury car my parents had leased for her was repossessed in broad daylight. I heard from a neighbor that she stood on the curb, crying as the tow truck drove away. My mother tried every angle. First, it was guilt. Avery, you're destroying our family. You've always been so cold, so unforgiving. Then, it turned to desperation, calling my attorney, threatening lawsuits, even begging for private negotiations. My father went silent, retreating behind emails and legal representation. Each message I received, I saved. Each accusation, each attempt to shift the blame, became one more piece of documentation, neatly filed away with the rest. Through it all, I stayed calm. I never raised my voice. I never posted a single angry word online. Instead, I let the truth and the evidence do all the talking. My attorney handled every communication. The IRS opened a formal investigation into the missing funds and the forged documents, and a civil court date was set for the following spring. The consequences were real. And this time, no amount of family pleading could make them disappear. It wasn't just legal or financial. The social fallout was brutal in its own right. My parents were quietly removed from several community boards. Invitation dried up. My mother's friends stopped calling. My father's reputation at work took a hit he would never fully recover from. Brielle, who had never held a steady job in her life, suddenly found herself looking for work without connections, without sympathy, without the safety net she'd always relied on. There was an attempt at reconciliation. Of course, it came one cold morning. A few weeks after the dust had settled, my mother left a voicemail, her voice soft, almost broken. Avery, maybe we all made mistakes. Let's meet and talk. Just the two of us. Don't do this to us. She never once apologized. Never once took responsibility. She just wanted the consequences to go away. I listened to the message twice. I thought about every year I'd given, every moment I'd swallowed my own feelings for the sake of family unity. I thought about all the warnings I'd ignored, all the small betrayals I'd let slide. And then I pressed delete. That chapter was closed. In the weeks that followed, the shape of my life changed completely. I started sleeping through the night again. No longer waking up to frantic family texts or last-minute crises, I focused on my work, rediscovering a sense of pride in what I'd built on my own. Without help, without shortcuts. My friends, the ones who had supported me through everything, became the new foundation of my world. Elena, especially, never left my side. She told me, "You did what no one else ever could. You changed the pattern." I would be lying if I said it was easy. There were days when the silence from my family hurt more than all the shouting ever did. There were moments when I missed what I thought we had the idea of family, not the reality. But there was relief, too. and a quiet, growing sense of peace. For the first time, I had boundaries that meant something. I had proof that standing up for myself, no matter how late, no matter how painful, was worth it. The world didn't end. I didn't fall apart. I started to heal. There's a kind of justice in watching those who harmed you finally face the truth. Not because they learned or changed, but because the mask slipped and everyone could see what had been hidden for so long. Brielle and my parents would go on with their lives. But the story had changed forever. I was no longer the backup, no longer the safety net. And maybe, just maybe, someone else watching would realize they could draw their own line. 2. Life didn't return to normal because, honestly, normal had never really existed for me. Instead, something better took its place. In the months after everything unfolded, I discovered a different kind of family, built not on obligation or blood, but on respect, loyalty, and the willingness to show up when it matters most. The first real turning point came that November, on Thanksgiving. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the dread creeping in as the holiday approached. No one expected me to organize a meal for 20 people. No last-minute emergencies. No guilt trips. That Thursday, I woke up in my sun-filled apartment in Cambridge to the smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee Elena had come over the night before. Arms full of groceries. Determined that we would do Thanksgiving our way. By noon, my living room was full friends from college. A couple of colleagues. Even a neighbor I'd only met twice, but who brought homemade pumpkin bread. We laughed. Told stories. Spilled wine on the carpet. And no one kept score. The day felt light. As if someone had opened a window in my life and let the stale air out. We went around the table, each of us naming something we were grateful for. When my turn came, I looked at the faces around me and realized, truly, for the first time, I belonged. Not because I'd earned it by sacrificing or keeping the peace, but because these people cared for me exactly as I was. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I found myself standing at the window, looking out at the twinkling city lights. For so long, I had thought family was something you had to fight for. Something you could lose in an instant if you didn't keep bending. But now, I saw it differently. Family, real family, is something you create, choice by choice, day by day. With the people who choose you back, my work life blossomed. 2. Without the constant weight of family drama, I found myself stepping into new challenges, taking on bigger projects, and finally, truly enjoying what I did. My team even threw me a surprise party for landing a huge client, a party where the only drama was someone setting off the smoke alarm with a batch of questionable cupcakes. I laughed until I cried. And for once, the tears were happy ones. Of course, there were still quiet mornings when I remembered the way my mother used to braid my hair, or nights when a familiar song made me ache for a version of my family that had never really existed. But I let myself feel it. I didn't run from the sadness, and I didn't let it define me. I knew now that healing wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It was about finally giving myself permission to stop hoping for a different ending. The world didn't fall apart because I drew a line. If anything, it grew bigger. I traveled to places I'd always dreamed of: Italy in the spring, a cabin in Vermont that winter. I volunteered at a shelter downtown. Met people whose kindness floored me, whose stories made mine feel a little less lonely. Every so often, someone would ask about my family, and I'd just say, "It's complicated," and then move the conversation to what really mattered. What matters now is that I have peace. Not every day, not every moment, but enough to believe that what happened to me wasn't a punishment, but a beginning. So, To anyone listening who's ever wondered if it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family, this is for you. Your worth isn't measured by how much you endure or how small you make yourself for someone else's comfort. It's measured by the boundaries you honor, by the love you choose, and by the courage it takes to rewrite your own story. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to choose yourself over your family? I'd love to hear what happened. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story meant something to you, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Sometimes, the best family you'll ever have is the one you build for yourself.